They've known this problem's been around for a long time, but they've been able to paper it over and get away with it because the cycles, even the housing bubble, was papered over. But you can do that just for so long. And yet after the bubble burst in '08, we never went back to economic growth enough to cover all the spending. The spending and living beyond our means continued, but there wasn't a correction. Since Bretton Woods started in '71, we'd have ups and downs, and they were seeing the prices were getting ahead of things and was getting a little frothy. So they say, well, we better back off and just go up, and then have a recession, and that sort of makes enough correction for the individuals to go back to work. Well, see, that's not working now, and the addiction is so powerful that following '08, they had to get into being real determined to convince the markets they're serious, and that's when the QE stuff came in. Then there's talking about trillions of dollars, and the evidence that was starting to show that this was bad. The Fed was worried about it. So in 1914, in the next couple of years, they started barely shrinking the balance sheet. But by 2019, it was the interest rates were going up, and that is when the markets shouted that there's something wrong, and that's when the overnight rates, which is totally rigged and has access to the Fed, the overnight rates, which were totally unsustainable, went up to 10%. I thought that was a major event, and I think it was a signal of what is coming. But even that was pulled off because emergency, get the printing presses running, and that sort of helped along. But it had to depend since then on $120 billion monthly purchase by the Fed, $80 billion of treasuries, and $40 billion of mortgage-backed securities. So yeah, it's injected. The trust factor was still there, and they got away with it. But right now, that is changing again. And this is why they had a major meeting, a major announcement on Wednesday that things were going to be different. They were going to change the policy. And on the surface, it was a claim they were going to really tighten. It's surprising at first for a lot of people why the markets didn't really crash. But there are some parts of the market, if you look carefully, they're crashing. But the major markets that the banks are concerned about, they haven't literally crumbled, and that it says they're going to keep it going for a while. But in 2019, after a couple of years, those rates went up. The market was saying it doesn't work, and that's when they had to once again go back and accelerating the monetary inflation. And that we're not at that point now, but we know it's coming. Most people don't believe this. Peter Schiff isn't the only one that's skeptical. There's some bankers out there that are smart enough to know about it, but they have to be real careful. They're under restraints. They have to be a little bit politically correct. So I think it's up for grabs. I think it's very, very serious. The spending is not going to go down. And when you look at what's happened here in the last couple of years, when you look at correcting for the Fed's mistakes and the printing of money there, as well as the crazy stuff going on with COVID and that epidemic that's going on, the epidemic of when are we going to get our passports for everybody? So that's going on, and this to me is leading to big trouble. And I think what we've seen this past week and this announcement on Wednesday didn't make the markets worse. But today, the announcement about employment, they were expecting very, very super employment because the jobs are going begging, and yet new jobs were lower than expectations. So that was a weakness on the market. But the big problem for most people who are serious about this, first, First, you have to interpret the statistics. Then you have to accept the fact that they're government statistics. So if you go only by the government printed of the CPI on the health of the dollar, you could be in trouble. So this is something that is going on. The interpretation is very, very difficult, but they're struggling. And tell you what, I'd hate to be on Wall Street being responsible for a lot of people's money. I'd be looking long term, and I couldn't live through these 20-minute deals. Invest for 20 minutes, and can I get out fast enough? And I think all that's going to accelerate. And one day, what we'll see is it's going to get loose and be totally uncontrollable, and nobody is going to respond to what the Fed says. They pretend that everything is okay, but I think they're getting worried. And the market's a little shaky up and down, and sometimes when there's an announcement like they had this past week on Wednesday, the reaction gets confusing too. It's not all predictable. They don't have a computer that can actually, predict what is happening. And therefore, the markets go up. Sometimes right after these major announcements, the stocks will go up or stocks will crash. An hour later, something else happens. It's not stability. It's the opposite of stability, because we have a currency that you can't even define. And I think we're in the process of coming around to admitting another phase of our bankruptcy, because I think the first time we were bankrupt in many ways was when Roosevelt took over in 1933. He said, well, we can't afford to honor our commitment and our promises to the American people about gold, so he took the gold away from the people. So that was a pretty good hint of what was coming. But it's amazing, it's lasted a long time. And then they set us up a pseudo standard, which predictably by many Austrian free market economists said, it can't last. From day one, Henry Hazlitt said that. And sure enough, by 1971, August 15th, that system collapsed. A further indication that we're stretching it. We're living beyond our means, and we're faking it. But the people are taking our money, and our army follows our money, and therefore we can enforce the law. But I think we're now entering this next phase of what's happening, and they're in a dilemma because they printed a lot of money. The recession of 2008 plus the introduction of QE and boosting the balance sheet hugely, that now they're in a dilemma. A couple years ago, they tried to reduce the balance sheet, and they ran into trouble. So, and we have talked about this, Chris, as you know, about the dilemma the Fed's in. They're honestly trying to find a solution, but if they don't admit or understand the problem, they're going to have a trouble finding what the solution is. And the more they work at it, and the more they give us a solution, the most it can do is delay the inevitable, and that is a real crunch in the lowering of the standard of living of a lot of Americans, and a lot of people around the world, because the dollar system has been ingrained and there's a lot of trust placed in it. And I think there is a real dilemma there on managing the money. Even if we were in charge of it, Chris, there's no wand to wave and say, okay, this is what you do and the dollar will be sound as ever. When you look at why isn't it sound? Well, it's because government's big and they run up deficits, and there's a deep state that controls the monetary system, and on and on. There's no wands to wave. And the addiction is very, very powerful. So I guess what we should do, Chris, is keep plugging away at trying to point out the dilemmas and pointing out that it need not be this way. And there is a different type of system of money that would, solve our problem and actually preserve the wealth of the people rather than destroying it.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information, and it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
Do you want to know one thing about crypto? I made over 3,000% in profit in a few weeks. Fact is, the traditional financial system, the traditional money system makes you poor, not rich. If you want to earn $500,000, $1 million, you have to wait until you're 50, 60, 70. In the traditional financial system, and you probably will still be broke. And you will be old. This is not a sexy combination, as you can imagine. But the question is, how can you start in crypto and make these profits? Where to invest? Where to start? My name is Gunnar and I'm from Germany, as you can hear, and things are a little bit different in Germany. More about that later on. The fact is, there are lots of different cryptocurrencies. It's a gigantic universe where beginners and professionals get easily lost. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are 7 key steps you need to follow to become successful in this market. You have to know them, and if you fail one of them, it's literally impossible to succeed in this market. Just an example, one of the key points is your exchange, and one of the biggest are, for example, Binance and Coinbase. These are trusted and well-established exchanges, but, and this is a big but, you won't find the super profitable coins on those exchanges. The unknown super profitable coins that get gigantic profits are not traded on those kind of exchanges. They are traded on much smaller insider platforms that are barely known. And I can tell you what those super secret exchanges are and why they are so profitable. And another super important thing are the right information sources. The point is, the internet is gigantic. There are hundreds and hundreds of YouTube channels, blogs, pages, and much more. And there are also market makers and influencers. For example, Elon Musk, he is not a crypto guy, but the moment he recommended Dogecoin, it went through the roof, to the moon, so to say. But why did he recommend it? Where did he hear it from? He didn't hear it from newspapers. And believe me, he is listening to someone. But you have to know who, and you have to react before he is reacting. This is really important. And these are only 2 of the 7 steps you have to follow in order to be successful in crypto. And if you want to know all of these steps in much more detail, and if you want to have a comprehensive checklist, here's what you should do. There is a link below this video. Click on this link and you will get the opportunity to subscribe to my channel. Click on the link and you will see a video where I explain the next steps. So see you soon. Click on the link now. I'll see you there.